it's very hard taking an animal that you've reared and loved and treated like a pet and a friend to the abattoir. That is a real, I call it the betrayal day. And it weighs on me for weeks before and weeks afterwards. And, on that journey there with them in the back in the trailer, I'm like wrestling with the morality of that decision.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Aliza Barbanel. Julius Roberts is a chef and farmer living in the idyllic English countryside off the Dorset coast. He's also the author of The Farm Table, a new cookbook chronicling his life cultivating crops, animals, and cooking with the bounty. It's a real delight to have him on the show to talk about transitioning from cooking in restaurants to family farming, daily life on the farm, recipe development, and more. Julius Roberts, this is Taste. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's really fun to have you here. How is it being back in New York so far?
Great. I mean, it's only my second time here, so I'm still in that mode where it very much feels like you're in a film.
Yeah.
I love the skylines, and it was pretty special to be here in the snow.
Yeah, I mean, that feeling never goes away, I would say. Coming back to New York after your first trip, did you eat anything you needed to try again, or you just are still dipping your toes into the water?
I went to Katz's yesterday.
Oh, okay, good.
Which is pretty cool. I've obviously seen those sandwiches online for years. I can't believe how big they are.
They're gigantic, and they're very expensive also because they're just so huge.
Can you get a half?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would be scared to ask. I feel like they're kind of the old school deli guys that have a certain way of doing things, but you have the accent, so maybe they would let you get away with it.
Yeah, I got on with the guy serving. It was quite a quiet day. But yeah, it was seriously good.
What did you get, pastrami?
I got just classic pastrami sandwich with the 2 types of cucumbers and a lot of mustard.
2 types of cucumbers?
Yeah, they do. Do you call them pickles?
Yeah, sure.
They do, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, they are cucumber.
Yeah,
either works.
They do a light one, which is very green, which is hardly pickled, and then a sour one. So it's quite nice to get this contrast.
To be honest, I feel like Katz's is the kind of place that when you're visiting the city you go to, and then if you live nearby or you have a really strong craving for pastrami, then you'll go back. But I haven't been in a couple years, so the fact that they have multiple pickles, like I'm not even up on my Katz's game, I guess.
Well, yeah, worth a trip back. And I want to try the matzo ball soup. I think I might get that later today.
Oh, that is the ultimate snowy, cold weather in New York experience. A couple weekends ago, I had my ultimate solo New York day, which was that it was gray and rainy. And I went to a deli in Manhattan, sat at the counter and had a matzo ball soup and a tuna melt and read my book by myself. And it was my fantasy, you know?
That's pretty damn nice.
Yeah, I mean, you have a beautiful country life, so that's another kind of fantasy, I guess. And it's really fun to have you back on the show after our little live event that we did in December. I'm curious if you could maybe just start out the conversation, just for our listeners who aren't as familiar with you, by saying a little bit about what inspired you to make the shift from cooking in restaurants to farming, and how long has it been since you made that transition?
So yeah, it's about 8 years ago now that I left working as a chef in London and moved to the countryside to start a small farm.
Does that feel like a long time to you?
Yeah, but time really does fly and so much has happened. It's quite a distorted 8 years. So part of it feels like yesterday and then it feels like a long time ago too. I'm always, especially recently, really craving going back to those simpler days. My first few years on the farm when I had no idea what I was doing and it was also new, were a very special time. But the story was that I was chefing in London at a great restaurant called Noble Rot, which is a French-inspired wine bar that does seriously good wine. They win the wine list of London every year.
They also have a natural wine magazine, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they started as a mag, and then I think through sponsorship and fundraising through the magazine started the restaurant. And it does very low-key, seasonal, simple, 3 good things on a plate, delicious food. English, French, a little bit of Spanish, small bit of Italian, but, very much English, French food. And they were the guys that taught me to cook. I never went to culinary school or anything like that. I just went straight into the restaurant world, got very lucky getting a job there and had this, wild baptism of fire. It was brutal. Going into a restaurant that's just opening as your first restaurant job is hardcore.
Do you remember a prep job or something you had to do where you realized, okay, maybe I'm in over my head a little bit?
it wasn't necessarily individual stuff. It was just the volume of work I had to keep up with. And I spent my whole year there chasing my tail. I was never caught up with what I needed to do. So I'd be eating my lunch while sitting there chopping, trying to just catch up with the list of things. And the pressure of that and the stress of that is insane. Chefs are sadists towards themselves.
So you went to the famously chill world of farming instead.
So yeah, obviously you get very inspired by food and ingredients. And each day the producers would turn up in the morning with their boxes of stunning produce and essentially pitch to my chef about how they grew them, because they're trying to sell to him and he's constantly looking for the best ingredients possible, because ultimately there's nothing more important to your food than what you start with. And it was hearing those stories and seeing just the health of these guys. They're country folk, brown skin, blue-eyed, like smiling, and I'm there yellow, dying on my 5th coffee of the morning with...
Haven't seen the sunlight.
Yeah, exactly. You get into work in the dark, leave in the dark. And it just felt like that was a life that really appealed to me. So I left, which was a heartbreaking thing. There's a real camaraderie in the kitchen. Your brothers in arms. And I remember, it took me weeks. We'd sit outside at the end of our shifts having cigarettes, chatting together. And I, was trying to find that moment to sort of say, look, guys, I've got to leave. Like, I can't do this anymore. Because the amount of work that they would have to do to pick up the fact that they'd left a key member is just brutal. And that was a very hard thing to do. But leaving to the countryside is the best thing I've ever done. And there's regrets, and I miss the restaurant world, but I would also never go back. And I'm a true kind of country guy now. The city, as much as I love little like forays into the city, it's not where I'm supposed to be anymore.
A different pace. And I guess now that you've been doing it for 8 years, looking back at the early years when you didn't quite know what was happening is maybe nostalgic. But I would imagine in the moment, it must have been very overwhelming to have to learn how to do so many things. Did you have like a mentor, or how did you kind of get the farm going?
It was just a big old leap of faith. I'd watched some TV shows about farming and had some self-sufficiency manuals, but really I bought some pigs and dove in straight at the deep end. And yeah, you get these days where you're like, I am way in over my head. I've got no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to fix this. An animal's ill or someone's escaped and you don't have the past knowledge to kind of fix that. But that like being right there on the edge is a very good feeling. I love learning by doing, and I've really learned to love failure as a kind of way of learning. So yeah, those past days were definitely stressful and there was a ton to learn, but it was a very innocent, very inspiring time where it was, a journey of discovery is a pretty epic thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the pigs. I think they're called Mongolica pigs.
Yeah.
So why are those the preferred pig?
They're not necessarily a pig I'd get again, but they were an amazing...
So they're not the preferred pig.
They are... So when I was in the restaurant world, Mongolica was this type of pig coming onto the scene because they have this unbelievable amount of fat on them. They're an old school curing pig from Hungary. In the old days, you didn't just have your pig for eating, you had it for the fat too, which was your cooking, your oil for cooking. It was your oil for candle making, for making soaps. The lard that came off a pig was as much a part of it as the meat. Having that amazing casing of fat also makes them incredible for curing. And when you cure them, they come out much like Iberico ham. And so it was more, I suppose, inspired by a certain chefy pretentiousness. I went for Mongolica. And also they're just a great old breed. I love the old breeds.
They're cute also.
They're beautiful. They're half wild boar. They've got these amazing long noses. They have curly hair like a sheep. Mm-hmm. And these old breeds are just tough as nails. So as a novice farmer, it's quite good going for the breeds that look after themselves, really. But they did absolutely trash where they lived because they are like bulldozers. They have these long noses that just dig so deep. And by the time the pigs had sadly moved on and we were eating them, the pen that we built them was like 1.5 meters deeper than it had been when they started. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I want to talk about the eating of animals because I think that for some people, when you say farming, like maybe they don't even think about animals. They would think about just like growing vegetables or something. So did you always know that you wanted to have animals as a core part of your farm?
Yeah, I think So when I moved in the depths of winter, and it was too hard to do any digging or any planting, too cold. Chickens felt too easy. Pigs felt like a really big step that was, me really putting my foot into this new way of life. So it was definitely like, I do eat meat. And my belief is very much that, like, if you can't eat your own meat, I shouldn't be eating meat at all. It's very hard taking an animal that you've reared and loved and treated like a pet and a friend to the abattoir. That is I call it the betrayal day. And it weighs on me for weeks before and weeks afterwards. And, on that journey there with them in the back in the trailer, I'm like wrestling with the morality of that decision. It's a brutal thing to have to do. And I put it off and off and off. Every single time I have to go, it makes me miserable. But I love the truth of me being so close and so sad about what I'm doing. And I think we've lost a lot of the morality of eating meat in the world at the moment. So I feel quite proud to be so close to that. And I love having the opportunity to talk about it because I think it's not something that many people think of. But it was definitely always part of the plan. And if anything has become even more important to me, I eat a lot less meat than I used to because I feel so aware of the cost and the price of eating meat, not just financially, but morally, on the planet, all sorts of things. And I just think we overindulge meat eating. We don't need to eat as much meat as we do. Less is more, and quality over quantity has become my real ethos.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that as a meat eater who doesn't have to slaughter my own meat, I like that. I like the idea of people like you that care about the meat that's raising it, and that intentionality is a part of it, because meat has literally, at least here in America, been subsidized by the government. Like, it shouldn't be as affordable to eat as it actually is. No. And I think that because it is so affordable, it makes it this really easy option for people, which obviously, like, food costs in general are quite high, and like, I don't fault anybody for that. But I think that like the real cost isn't something that most people are even aware of. So it's interesting to hear your side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, subsidy essentially means that something's unsustainable. If you're needing extra help to produce something, it means that your inputs are bigger than your outputs. And yeah, that's a mistake in a world where there's resources are finite.
Definitely. So I wonder if, like, thinking back on these early years at the farm, if you could like go have lunch with yourself in the first year and give a piece of advice, what's something you would say? Like
I said earlier, I love all the mistakes I made because they've become such a part of my journey. Something Lauren, who I'm working with here in New York, and I were talking about yesterday was one day I was walking down to the pigs in the morning, taking them a bucket of apples, some acorns like that I'd harvested from the oak trees, and their normal feed. And it was the most beautiful winter morning. Those days like today where the air is so crisp and the sun is shining, but it's cold, but that warmth on your skin, despite the cold, is just the best feeling. I thought, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let the pigs out today. I reckon they're so hungry, they'll just follow me with the bucket around and they can have a bit of a walk. We'll have a lovely day. So I went down to the pen, opened the gate, and they sort of looked at this hole that suddenly appeared in their pen. Do you know the story of Plato's cave? The idea that people have been trapped in a cave and they suddenly open the door and your reality just changes so much that you don't even know like what's left or right. And the pigs kind of walked through this hole and were so daunted by this new world they were experiencing. And then suddenly this wild look came over their eyes and 4 pigs went in 4 different directions at like breakneck speed. And I've never been so stressed. We lived next to a golf course at that time, and they were kind of barreling towards it, running through brambles and the bush, like, bulldozers. They were kind of finding dead squirrels and pheasants and just eating them. And they couldn't have been less interested in the food that I was, the food bucket that I was trying to shake.
Your precious acorns and apples.
Yeah, not a chance. And I'm there in, big winter boots, a huge coat, running after them, sweating, throwing off layers as I ran, trying to get them back. It took 4 hours or 2 hours. And by the time I got them in, I collapsed, like I fainted on the floor and sort of came to dizzy a few minutes later and got so sick, when you get warm and then cold in the winter. Oh
Such a bad feeling.
But it's sort of little things like that. I don't think there was ever any, and then there is, animals do die and things like that. But all the mistakes have never been major enough to like want to undo them, but the learning from them has always been key.
Right. I feel like maybe that's even the lesson, although maybe you felt this way back in that moment, even that like every mistake was going to be how you know how to do something properly the next time. And farming is such a long-term game. I think about this with cooking also. Like I I can't wait to be the grandma that's so good at cooking everything because I've been cooking those dishes now and I'm going to keep cooking them. That kind of repetition, that is a learning.
Yeah. Another one that's obviously like a sort of lovely, funny story that ultimately ended with no consequences. But, other times are that time you didn't wake up early enough and you come out and a mother's there with her little lamb that is stillborn, pawing at it, desperate for it to get up, her kind of instincts, motherly instincts firing, wanting to feed this thing, wanting to nurture this thing, and it's just not moving. And there's a big part of you that's like, God, if I'd been there 10 minutes earlier, I could have saved that.
Yeah.
And those are pretty, that's a hard lesson to learn, but ultimately an important one too.
Yeah. And I feel like to me, even on the concept of meat eating, like when you are reminded that death can happen for an animal in so many, or for us in so many different kinds of ways, like at least having that death serve some cause, which is feeding people and feeding them like delicious quality food, like feels like it has more value necessarily than like some of the other things that can happen.
Yeah. And that's why it's important that, we don't waste our food, that we appreciate it, that we care where it's come from. We think about where it's come from and we, respect it on the plate as much as we do in the field. And that's what's so special about cooking is you're, nurturing and giving love to friends and family, all sitting at the table together, the lovely warm conversation it brings. Yeah, I think to eat meat thoughtlessly is a real mistake in a world where, the place that we call home is, having quite a tough time at the back of that.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah.
So I guess thinking about respecting the food on the plate, I'm curious about how you approach recipe development. Obviously, we're here to talk about your wonderful new cookbook, The Farm Table. Do you cook things just for yourself and then adapt the recipe into something that you think you're going to share, like maybe online or in your book? Or what's kind of your process for taking like the day-to-day sustenance into recipes that are meant to be shared?
I mean, I cook for myself, every day. And it's generally pretty lovely food that I think people would be interested to try. I'm not dumbing down the food that I make for the internet or for my books. It's just like lovely, simple, seasonal cooking that looks elegant and lovely on the plate, but anyone could make themselves at home. If it's a freezing cold day and I've had a big morning outside, I will want something warming and sustaining and make a lovely stew. And it's as simple as that. I just think the days that happen inspire me, what's in the garden, what's growing in the woods or what's in the farm shop that day. And you just make something around it. The book ethos is that it's set through the seasons. So everything is, I like to live and cook super seasonally. It's my one like big rule. Once my tomatoes are finished in September, October, I'm not going to touch another one until June when they're growing again. Same with courgettes, all sorts of things. I really kind of live by that. For me, there's nothing worse than a kind of crap, bland, colorless winter tomato that has been flown across the world and has no life to it whatsoever. It's a shadow of what a tomato should be. And the joy of waiting for those good tomatoes to come back, that anticipation, massively builds the flavor. I get so excited for tomatoes to come back, courgettes, chilies, peppers, whatever it is, because you're desperate for it. Asparagus. I can't wait for in a few weeks it'll be asparagus season again.
Yeah, asparagus is the first thing kind of. We get ramps here early in the year.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the book seasonally, so were you developing every season like for that book and then coming back to it when you were getting new ingredients, or how did that kind of work in terms of waiting to have everything?
We did the book in quite an unusual way. So most people would bring a kind of mostly finished skeleton of a book to the publisher, photograph it, finesse it, print it. Whereas this was, because I wanted it to do it seasonally, I said, right, I'm going to start writing now. We can publish the book then. And, I wrote spring, tested all the way through. Then we shot it right at the end of the spring, still with ingredients from the garden in the farm shops. Then wrote summer, tested it, shot it, wrote autumn. So it kind of went like that. So the book has this, you can kind of feel the way the light changes in it. You can feel the colors in the spring chapter compared to the autumn chapter are so different. And I love that, and it meant we weren't kind of buying anything in from abroad. It was super local, lovely ethos. And, those ingredients, when they're of the time, just do look and taste beautiful. And I think you can really feel that in the book. And then it has this lovely seasonal photography of farm life, because it was about using food and the seasons as a way of telling the story of the year through the farm.
Yeah, I think it really comes across that you must have done something in that way. It feels very honest in terms of the images really reflecting like what you're writing about and what the recipes are about. Did you have a favorite season?
In the book, I think my winter cooking is probably the best. I think
Interesting. I feel like that's kind of like, I mean, it's a very cozy season to cook, but in terms of the produce, I feel like it's not really a fan favorite.
no, it's a harder season to cook in because you're much more limited. But I think it's a season where you really need your food. You know, when it's blooming cold, you're working hard outside. The feeling of something like warm and sustaining when you get back in is just so good. Whereas summer, you know, it's so hot, you almost don't want to eat. I love the cooking of the summer because it's very like off the cuff and fast and, you know, just kind of thrown together onto the plate. But I think the like slower, more methodical, more technical, not necessarily meaning hard, but like there's a lot more stages in winter cooking. I love the building of flavor that you get in winter. So it's a chapter I'm particularly proud of.
Yeah. What would you want to eat today? It's very snowy and cold in New York from the winter chapter.
A recipe that I'm particularly proud of is this slow cooked pork belly with prunes and onions and sage. When you've had pork, like everyone makes a big fuss over the crispy skin, which is lovely, don't get me wrong. But this is quite a cool way of cooking it, inspired by like the more Chinese style where you braise it with the skin on and the skin becomes this amazing jellyish texture. But instead of soy and mirin and, you know, all these interesting things, it's a more English version of that with like cider and milk. And you get this amazing pork that slowly cooks in the cider and milk, which reduces down and kind of curdles a bit to this incredible sauce with the like sweetness from the prunes, sharpness from the cider. You have it with some mash, some nutmeg on top, and it is, I love that recipe so much.
It sounds really delicious and cozy. No wonder it's a favorite from the book. I'm curious on the flip side if there's a recipe that you had to test for a long time to get right that maybe was a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, loads. Some of them you kind of first time you were like, this is an absolute hole in one. I'll make it one more time just to make sure we're safe, but this is a winner. But then others, you know, like the puddings, for instance, I'm not a pastry chef by trade. So the puddings took a lot more work in the book. Just because it's a bit, you know, out of my comfort zone. There's some of the recipes I'm most proud of because I put a lot of work into them. But they took a lot more testing. One, for instance, was, you know, panna cotta.
Yeah.
So panna cotta is a dish where like, I would never really order that in the restaurant. I think it can be a bit of a like punch at the end of the meal and often leave you, you know, quite wasted by it. You know, when they're like too thick and too rich, it kind of kills you. So I wanted to make a really light panna cotta, not too tall, quite thin, and it's quite sharp. So I was trying different things like using yogurt, using sheep's milk, and trying to, you know, sour it up and make it not such a kind of fatty hit, and end up doing a buttermilk panna cotta recipe with roasted strawberries with black pepper, which is so good. With the panna cotta flavored with a bit of elderflower, where you just steep the flowers in the warm milk before you set it. That took a week of like making, you know, the different percentages and types of cream and milk that I was using. You know, I'd be taking up a tray of different panna cottas to mum, who'd like have a spoon of each, and we were trying to work out which was best. And by the end of the week, like even the chickens were eating panna cotta. It was so fun. I'd go and, you know, turn out a kind of ramekin with the panna cotta in that had only had a spoon taken out of it and set it on the ground for the chickens who'd peck at it.
It must be very satisfying to watch those little tiny beaks.
It was so
up
good.
The panna cotta.
It was so good. Yeah. And they hate having messy beaks, chickens. They're kind of funnily tidy about their beaks. And they do this really lovely, like wiping thing on the floor, on the grass after they're done. The best is watching them eat things like spaghetti, but the panna cotta was very funny.
Do they slurp the spaghetti?
They do it in one. So it's much like in, what's that film, Lady and the Tramp?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I felt like I was being like a silly city person by even asking that, because I was like, there's no way chickens know how to slurp.
Yeah,
they do.
They kind of, you know, it goes down bit by bit.
Yeah.
Once, I think like our postman dropped a load of elastic bands and they thought that was worms or spaghetti, and I had to pull these elastic bands out of their mouths.
That's so funny.
Because it's obviously like worms. So for them, you know, which is one of their favorite foods.
Yeah, they even jiggle like a worm would. Do they have names?
I don't name my chickens, no. It's quite bad luck to do that. I think the minute you name one, the fox is going to get it. So there's a lovely chicken in the beginning of my book, who we called Henny, who was just so tame and so sweet. But the minute I took a photo of her and kind of immortalized her in the book, the fox grabbed her.
It's funny that you say that, because I was about to say that everyone I know that's named their chickens, it's been very sad.
It's a death sentence.
Yeah, the coyotes in LA, people I know that have chickens out there. Game over.
Yeah.
So, okay, you mentioned asparagus. Let's talk about spring on the farm a little bit. What are the first crops that come up? What are you most excited to cook with?
Spring's a funny time. The early part of spring is called the hungry gap, which is where the winter produce is finishing and the spring stuff isn't quite starting. So it can be quite a Spartan time. But once spring gets going, you've got peas, you've got wild garlic, which you guys call ramps,
So is the hungry time like early March?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah. Even the beginning of April can be quite a tough time.
Yeah.
But yeah, peas, broad beans, you have the first little bit of mint, you might have some new potatoes, spring onions. So it's a lovely, like green, very light, delicious time. But it's also the time when I'm like the most busy because obviously all the animals are giving birth. So it tends to be quite quick meals in like stolen moments between watching with binoculars while sheep are about to give birth and needing to run in and help.
Yeah. Did you realize you were going to become so much of a sheep midwife?
No, I mean, that's the stuff that really takes you by surprise. I've done things that I never thought I'd do. I remember the first time I kind of had to really help out. I had a sheep who had, you see like fluids coming out the back end, let's say, just as you would in mums in that, we know of. And sheep are very stoic. They don't show their pain. They just crack on. So you'll have a sheep who's like clearly halfway through giving birth, but she's just there eating grass. But you know that something's up. If you watch and it's been 2 hours while you've, just had this, a little bit of a nose poking out, you need to help and get stuck in. Often they can kind of tighten up rather than relax and the lamb gets stuck, maybe with its head out and it's getting suffocated. I called, when I was in the early days, I called my shepherdess friend, Angie, and said, Angie, something's going on here. I don't really know what to do. And she said, you've got to catch it and you've got to get in there and you've got to pull that out. And I thought, what? I do that? Doesn't the vet do that? She was like, no. If you call the vet every time you've got that, you're going to be in the red. So you spend ages trying to catch this sheep who's got no intention of being caught while they're giving birth. And yeah, you just lube up with this special animal. We have these huge buckets of animal lube.
Glamorous.
Wash your hands and like in you go. And the crazy thing is when you have twins, you've got you can't just pull a lamb out like randomly. They have to come out the right way. And often what will happen, the reason they get stuck is because they've got their arms back, which if you put your arms back, it makes your shoulders very wide. Whereas if you go into a diving position, your shoulders are nice and tight. So that's how they're supposed to come out in the diving way. But if they get their arms pinned, you have to kind of go in and unhook these arms and get them coming out first. But if you've got twins, you've got, 8 legs. You have to work out which ways the hoofs are pointing, make sure that that's from this lamb, not the other, and you're just blind. So that's like quite a classic story in spring. I'll be there with someone on the phone on speaker, someone else holding the sheep and me kind of fumbling about.
How many sheep do you think you've helped birth?
Oh, lots. You probably get 5 tricky births a year.
Wow.
But it's the best. I cannot describe to you how good a feeling it is. It is unbelievable when you save a life like that and you're so close to a birth.
Yeah.
And I think like initially the ewes, you call them, as a female sheep, have no intention of being caught, but there is a moment where they understand you're there helping. And when you pull this lamb out that was stuck, you do this thing where you like grab a blade of grass and tickle their little nose, and that tickling can really like snap them to life. And you hear these first kind of choked, spluttery, weak breaths, and the mum hops up and starts licking it, and you get these beautiful, like sensitive, instinctual reactions happening. That's the thing that has brought me so close to my animals and given me such a respect for them. They are so sensitive and loving and caring and individual, about how they do things, and so like us. It's kind of the most beautiful but also sad realization to have, because a lot of those animals just don't even get the chance to ever show that sensitivity or individuality in the modern world. So yeah, it can be very powerful, very poignant. It's my favorite time of year.
Yeah, it sounds really beautiful. I would imagine the like hormones are all swirling around from the animals and us, and we are animals, so it all kind of feels the same. I also am a twin, so now I'm just kind of having sympathy for the sheep twins. I'm glad that I didn't have to be birthed that kind of way necessarily.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious about like what the seafood is like living on the Dorset coast. What kinds of things are you catching and eating?
It's incredible. Yeah, I'm very lucky to live right by the sea. I eat a lot of crab. We have amazing crab where we are, and one of my farm shops sells like beautiful hand-picked crab for pretty good value. So I eat that a lot. A recent thing I've been seriously loving is Maybe you've had like crab mayo on toast before,
Mhm.
but there's a really fun thing where you do a curried mayo.
Oh, is this coronation mayo?
Yeah,
I
kind of.
just learned about this when I was in London,
Yeah.
and everyone was saying, "Oh, coronation mayo," as if I should have known what it was. But it's really good for someone who's not had it. Can you maybe explain what that is?
So like the classic English thing is called coronation chicken, which is a kind of curried mayo with chicken and mango chutney, and you have it in a sandwich or with like roast potatoes. It's really good.
And it was made for a royal coronation.
Yeah. So every time there's a coronation, a special dish gets made. And it's one of them. And it's probably the best one of them. Some of them are pretty dodgy. Like this year, it was an odd curried quiche thing that didn't really land at all. But coronation chicken has become like, that is a big time British like comfort dish. But you can do it with crab and make it a bit more like you kind of fry off some butter, add the spices in, render them off in the butter, and add sultanas and coriander and all these things, and stir that through crab and have it on toast with some chili, and it is so good.
It sounds really good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I have to try that. So I had, I guess, coronation mayo, which is just minus the chicken, just the condiment at 40 Maltby Street when I was in London.
Which is an amazing restaurant.
Which is an amazing restaurant. They nailed it. I had it, I think it was with cauliflower fritters. You just dipped them in, and we were sitting right at the counter. So we were watching them make everything and kind of eventually pluck up the courage to say, sorry, what is coronation mayo? And we got the whole download. But I like the idea of doing that with crab. That's really special.
Quite a kind of, it's a good snazzy like nibble to have with drinks before you have dinner, if you're ever into that kind of thing. Yeah, it's
on
so
like
good.
A thick cut toast, or
I quite like, not too thick, but like sourdough that's quite well toasted. Yeah, so good.
I like that idea. I don't know if it's easy to get milk bread where you are, if that's something you would ever make, but I would imagine it would be really good on milk bread too.
Yeah, I've made milk bread, but no, we aren't able to get that around us. Countryside is like, oddly, it's where all the best ingredients are, but the cooking is very simple around where we are because it's old school farming country.
Right, but then also you get to make everything, all the delicious things.
Yeah.
So I guess to close today, I want to play a little taste test with you. So I'll ask you some questions and you'll give me the first answer that comes into your head.
Sure.
Okay, favorite cookbook?
My favorite cookbook is called A Messy Business by Rowley Lee. It's a fantastic book. I love it to bits.
What is The Messy Business?
I suppose he's referring to cooking as a messy business. And it has this beautiful cover of a chopping board with a crab claw on and a hammer. And he's an old school, like very scene-defining British chef, like one of the godfathers of British cooking. And it's just a very purist, very beautiful, staggeringly delicious book.
Cool. Favorite vegetable to grow?
To grow? Courgettes, probably, zucchini. They are the most rewarding vegetable. Like, you will not be able to keep up with your courgette plant. They're impossible to kill. They're tough as nails. And yeah, it'll make you look like an amazing gardener, but secretly they're just awesome plants.
They're just popping
I
up.
love them to bits.
Okay, your favorite vegetable to eat?
I've recently fallen in love with Romanesco broccoli. You know that beautiful broccoli that does the kind of spiralization?
Fractal, yeah.
I mean, firstly, the coolest looking thing that ever grew. But they are just so delicious. I'm obsessed. A thing I've been doing lately is, so you just kind of briefly boil that in salted water and then mix it with a slow cooked onion with anchovy, garlic and herbs and olive oil. Toss that together and you can have it through pasta, have it on top of some white beans, have it with a steak. It's so good.
I love that. I'll have to try it. Okay, your favorite food focused like TV show or movie?
Food focused TV show or movie. I mean, I love Chef, Ratatouille. I love the food in like Studio Ghibli films.
Yeah, that's such a popular thing. I feel like the animation somehow looks so like real and delicious.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, your favorite season for cooking?
Well, like I said earlier, I think I'm definitely better at like autumn, winter kind of food. And autumn is an amazing time to cook because you have the end of summer produce and the beginning of winter produce. So it's where you have all of the ingredients to hand. So that's probably my favorite time.
Mm-hmm. Something that you'll never make from scratch?
Maybe like miso or puff pastry. I would love to make puff pastry because I love croissants more than anything in the world. But I've never made puff pastry yet. I make a thing called rough puff, which is like a cheats puff pastry.
It counts, yeah. Your favorite London restaurant?
Probably St. John or Kiln. St. John is like with Rowley Lee, like Fergus Henderson is the king of British food. He was Anthony Bourdain's favorite chef. And then Kiln is this awesome, like fast-paced Thai restaurant, which I just particularly love, like that kind of food, because I don't get to eat that kind of stuff in the countryside at all.
I went when I was in London in December, and now I'm thinking that maybe you mentioned it at the other podcast
I might
event.
have,
And
yeah.
I don't know if, I think a lot of people recommended it to me, but I loved it.
It's
I
so
had
good,
so much.
isn't it?
I sat at the counter and just ate like all of the little grilled skewers. It was
So
really
spicy.
fun. Yeah, I love that. Okay, your favorite London wine bar?
It's tricky. I mean, I'm so not a part of the London scene anymore. I really am just a country boy. So I think out of loyalty, I'd have to say Noble Rock, just because there's nowhere better to go and have a glass of wine.
Yeah, you got to say it. Okay, and to close, like something that would never grow on your farm in terms of like climate or geography that you wish could grow very well on your farm.
I mean, I was just in Mexico eating like avocados every single day that taste better than any avocado I've ever eaten. It would be pretty special to have a avocado tree in the garden.
That's probably like the best answer.
Yeah. Or mango. I mean, we were eating mangoes too, and they are just mind blowing when they're good.
Yeah, well, I'll manifest like a hybrid avocado mango tree that grows in Dorset for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming by, Julius. This was so fun.
It's a pleasure. Love being here.
Hey, Aliza, what is up? Can you tell me about your trip to Mexico?
I can, because it's very rainy and gray here in New York, and I was very hot for the past week, so I would love to reminisce on the mic with you about it.
Let me back up a bit, zoom out, so to speak. When you're thinking about Mexico, you've been many times. When you're thinking about this trip, what was your goal?
My goal was really to just be on a beach and be sweaty and hopefully like eating a fish taco and drinking a Corona. And I'm happy to say that I achieved all of those things. And I do feel like I'm bragging to all the New Yorkers right now who have been cold. But that was the goal of the trip. I went to Zipolite, which is in Oaxaca on the coast, kind of by Puerto Escondido. I was there for a couple of days, went to Mexico City for the weekend, and then came back. So it was kind of a quick trip, but definitely like a nice way to kind of get away from the winter and just be happy and warm.
So where should we begin on the recap of this trip?
I think we should start with Oaxaca and Zipolite and the towns around there, because while I flew through Mexico City, I just changed planes and we went straight to the beach from there. So that was kind of my first integration in, and it was really special. I went to this town called Zipolite that is like a kind of hippie beach town that first rose to popularity in the 70s. There are a lot of restaurants that are just right on the beach. You can kind of walk up to anywhere and get a chair to watch the sunset as long as you're buying like a beer or like a snack or something like that. So there were a couple cool places. One of them is a recommendation from Julius Roberts, actually, who when we were recording the episode, he had been in Mazunte, which is the town right north of there. So it's this breakfast place called El Sueño de Frida, which has just really classic Oaxacan breakfast like chilaquiles, huevos rancheros. I was doing a lot of smoothies because I'm not a big egg person. I thought that was really special. There also was a really good breakfast place in the town of Zipolite called Las Flores de Oaxaca. That is also a family-run, third-generation breakfast place. And then kind of surprisingly, there was like a very good Thai restaurant in Zipolite called Mau Mau. This is a very small town. You have to drive for an hour and a half probably from the closest airport. It's not very easy to get to. And I think that like to have a really exceptional Thai place kind of struck me by surprise, but everyone was recommending it. And we really had a special meal there. They were doing really good pad ki mao. They do pho sometimes. They don't do just Thai food, I guess. They kind of do
Southeast Asian fusion.
Southeast Asian in general, but it really was just like quite special and fun. And I think those were a lot of my highlights. Although really, I think the highlight of Zipolite is just kind of sitting on the beach. Watching the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, the beach sounds like that's the vibe. Now, I've heard about Oaxaca City. Your recap is void of mole and void of mezcal.
Yeah, okay, there was mole and mezcal involved.
I'm sure. But I only ask these as like the basic questions because I typically think of that region as being home to these items.
Yeah, so the hotel that I stayed at was attached to a mezcal bar. So I did have mezcal there at night, but I think because it was so hot, I was kind of more in like the cold beer vibe. And then in terms of mole, I did have a really good like mole, like tamales were good, and like for breakfast there was a lot of mole and eggs and that kind of thing. But because we were just so close to the ocean, I was kind of in more of a seafood vibe there. But when I went to Mexico City, I did have some good mole there also.
Yeah. So, I mean, Oaxaca, it sounds like there's multitudes there. There's a coast. You can drive 90 minutes from the airport, or you can stay more local, like closer to the airport. Oaxaca City, right? That's where.
I flew into Huatulco, which is on the coast. If you were going to go to Oaxaca City, you would fly in somewhere else probably.
I got it.
But it's kind of up in the mountains. We rented like a little scooter and we could kind of drive around, go to the other beach towns. I got stung by a bee while I was on the scooter. But besides that, it was really great.
Success. I mean, not the bee sting, but just like being on a beach and being hot and sweaty.
Yeah, exactly.
What a great trip.
It was really great. A lot of like cold, fresh coconuts right on the beach that they just smash open, pour some mezcal in. That's really great. But when I went to Mexico City, I had a lot of really good Asian meals there that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I went to Makan, which is a Singaporean restaurant that was just really phenomenal. Did like laksa, they did roast duck and this chili crab that was like so rich and delicious. And the staff comes around and ties crab bibs onto you before they serve it to you, which is just kind of fun to have an accessory while you're eating.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really special. Also, that was special was this Japanese place called Kura that I had udon at one night when I was dining with, their stomach was a little off and we just wanted like kind of a gentle noodle situation. So I thought that was really fun. I also met up with Abina Anamsamwa, who does the Cherry Bomb podcast, who is based partially in Mexico City, and she took me around to a couple of good bakeries. We went to Odette, which is in Condesa, which does kind of classic French style patisserie, but with Mexican flavors as well, like a really good guava pastry. We also walked over to this bakery Saint because she was trying to get baguettes to make for lunch. I had another coffee there. So it's just kind of fun to walk around and have like lots of little bites and things. And I also would say that I went back for Lucha Libre, which if you're going to Mexico City is just kind of a must do. And you can get these very large micheladas when you're there.
Oh, that's fun. And I saw you showed me a video. It's like a major stadium where they're doing Lucha Libre. It's not like a small.
Yeah, I mean, so
thing.
I went to Arena Mexico. They have a couple different stadiums. They do Lucha Libre 3 nights a week. Or actually, it's in the afternoon on Sundays, which is the family day, which is very cute because there's lots of little kids dressed up wearing their favorite masks. But it is just kind of a spectacular. And afterwards, we went to get late night tacos at Orinoco. And I would say that like half of the line were people who had also come from the match, which was really fun because everyone was kind of like talking about their favorite luchadors, like Mystico, who actually is a former WWE wrestler, and like waiting up to get these giant tacos. So it was all just very fun.
Let me ask you about tacos. You mentioned you went after the luchador moment, but like that's what I associate with Mexico City.
Yeah, I had a lot of really good tacos. I also visited my favorite quesadilla lady, Jenny, who's on the corner of like Colima and Merida, and she's definitely become quite popular over the past couple of years. Like I had to wait in line this time, which I've never had to wait in a long line before, but they are, churning out a really high quantity really fast on the street corner with beautiful like blue corn tortillas that are being made by hand. I got huitlacoche, which is my favorite, which is kind of harder to find here in the US, but it's that corn fungus. So it has these really soft corn kernels with the fungus attached to it as well. And I went to a bunch of other taco places that honestly I couldn't really tell you the names right now. It was kind of just walking by, you smell something delicious and you're like, oh, I guess I could have another al pastor taco right now. So I had a lot of al pastor, had a lot of campechano. It was all really great.
Oh my gosh. What a great trip. Are you going to move there?
I don't think I'm going to join the ranks of New Yorkers
to
Mexico City, but I would love to go back again and again. I think that there is so much beautiful like art and design and dog watching and all of that, and it's just a really special city to have the opportunity to get to go to.
Yeah, I love talking to you about Mexico. You have such a knowledge and just a fondness and respect for the culture, and I really just love hearing your thoughts on it.
Thank you. And now that I'm back, I'm just going to have to go back to my favorite taco places here too.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for sharing.
This is Taste is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Aliza Abarbanel. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things happening.